It was 1992. The murder of an MIT exchange student by a Cambridge teenager fueled tensions between the city and university. 3 Cambridge teenagers were involved in the fight that night. Only one remains in prison, and now an effort is underway to commute his sentence. NECN's Brad Puffer has tonight's cover story.
It was the beginning of the school year, my senior year.
Joe Donovan is just 33 years old and has already spent more than half his life behind bars. He is serving a life sentence with no chance of parole.
You're a kid, you're hoping it's just all a dream, you know? And like, oh man, maybe I'll wake up and this whole thing will be over and I'll be back in my bed, you know? But it's not the case. I'm still hoping for that, so. But it's not the case, you know?
Donovan is one of 3 teenagers convicted in the stabbing death of an MIT student from Norway back in 1992.
A knife entered his chest, went between the 7th and 8th ribs.
It was me being an idiot, punching the kid. But none of my wildest dreams did I think that that was going to turn into this.
On that Friday night in September, Donovan says he was walking down Memorial Drive on the edge of the MIT campus. He was walking with 2 other teenagers from the neighborhood, teenagers he says he did not know well. Donovan says he literally bumped into a young man speaking in another language.
I says, you know, what the hell was that, right? And I heard him laugh, and I thought he was laughing about me or something, and I says, you know, what are you talking about?
Donovan admits he started the fight. The punch broke his hand. But 15-year-old Sean McHugh pulled the knife.
And while Mr. Rothstein was down on the ground,
And stabbed Yngve Rothstein, killing him. Donovan claims he did not even know Rothstein was stabbed until the group of boys had run away.
He's wiping something off. I look over and it's his knife, right? I says, what the hell, what are you doing, right? And then I see his blood and I'm like, what, do you stab somebody?
Police said a wallet was stolen during the fight that the teenagers had planned to steal from students' lockers. Donovan was charged with felony murder, the same as first-degree murder, because the murder happened in the commission or attempted commission of a crime.
I didn't kill anybody, so who would think that you're going to be charged with murder? I even asked him, I'm like, well, how can you charge all 3 people? And he started telling me it's joint venture. We just charge everybody involved, right? And I'm like, you know, how does that work? And he's like, hey, it's how the law goes, you know?
Donovan quickly learned that if prosecutors could prove he knew about the knife, the robbery plan, and was willing to help, the murder charge could apply to him under the joint venture theory of law. These are facts that, to this day, Donovan denies he ever knew.
I had no idea that any of this stuff happened. Because who would do something like that? It's kind of crazy.
Sean McHugh, the teen who murdered Rothstein, was tried as a juvenile. He spent less than 11 years behind bars. The other teenager, Alfredo Velez, testified against Donovan at trial as part of a plea deal. He was released after serving less than a decade, is now married, and has children.
When you look at what happened to the co-defendants in this case, you can see that it patently is unfair to have him doing any more time than he has done.
Judge Robert Barton oversaw Donovan's trial. He spent 22 years on the bench, sat through more than 100 murder cases. Now retired, he says this is one case that sticks out.
I see where a Materano, who gave evidence against an FBI agent, who's a self-proclaimed assassin, hired gun, killer, he's walking the street after doing about 10 years. He's walking the street, he's going to get a movie offer. And Joe Donovan, who was the least involved, in my humble opinion, in a felony murder, is still doing time. That's not fair, that's not equitable.
And because Donovan had just turned 17 years old, it meant he was tried as an adult.
If this happened a couple of, weeks or months beforehand, he would have been tried as a juvenile. He'd be out in the street by now.
As Judge Barton looks over his notes from the trial, something else jumps out at him.
Went to the jury at 4 p.m. on the 27th of October. Next day at 2 p.m. They weren't out long. They must have had lunch, so it's not a hell of a lot of deliberations.
It disturbed me for years, you know, and it still disturbs me.
Carolyn Butterworth was one of those jurors. She was also one of several jurors with serious reservations about a guilty verdict. She is speaking publicly about the case for the first time.
Whether we thought he did it or didn't do it, It didn't matter. What mattered was that if someone died during an armed robbery, it was murder one. That was the law. But in my heart, he wasn't guilty of murder.
There was no option for manslaughter or a lesser charge. The jury was sequestered and wasn't going home until a verdict was reached. Butterworth says many jurors had young children and were eager to return home.
You kind of had to turn, because it was, if you didn't turn, we were never going home. And I, at the time, had no idea. We didn't have to come up with a verdict. We could have had a hung jury. I don't know how long it would last, but there were many people that did not want to go back to that hotel room.
So while there were questions over who had stolen the wallet and who knew, whether the testimony of the key witness had been truthful, those questions did not change the verdict.
Did I think the kid stole the wallet? No. Did I think he had a knife and no.
After less than a day of deliberating, the jury found Donovan guilty of felony murder.
Did you know going in, when you convicted of felony murder, it would be automatically life without parole?
No, I did not. And the people in our jury pool, I remember people saying, but he'll get out in a few years. Like, people said things like that.
Now Butterworth looks back, wishing she had been older, had spoken up more, had stood her ground.
I feel that there's an injustice. I don't know if he really should be in jail. I don't know if he ever should have gone to jail.
I don't think they really cared about justice. They cared about conviction.
Donovan's father, Joe Sr., continues to relive that night of the murder, the choices made, the trial, and the conviction that sent his son to prison for life.
I'm depressed. You know, it's been hard doing this for this long, and especially knowing that he don't deserve what he's got.
He also knows it could have been different had Joe just pled down to a lesser charge.
They offered him second, but my son said, listen, Dad, all I did was throw a punch, okay? I don't want to be known as a murderer for the rest of my life.
Now Joe Sr. is working with several friends and advocates to ask the governor to commute Donovan's life sentence. A commutation hasn't happened in Massachusetts since Governor William Weld held office, but he still holds out hope.
If the governor would give me a few minutes of his time and he would look at this case, I'm sure that he would say that this is not right.
Even the family of Yngve Rothstein apparently agrees. They would not speak directly to NECN, but referred us to a petition they signed for Donovan's release, saying, quote, the life without parole sentence was way too harsh, and he should be given a new chance.
They have a lot of heart, you know, I mean, to forgive.
Donovan says he wrote to the Rothstein family so they would know he feels remorse for his actions.
There was no way that I could have ever known that because of what I did, you know, that it would lead to somebody, that their son dying, you know, and I was not my intention, and I feel bad about it every day.
Donovan now spends a lot of time doing pencil drawings. He once had dreams of becoming an EMT. He now just dreams of being with his family, holding a job outside of prison walls.
It's an existence. I'm not sure if I have a real life here.
Do you believe you will get out one day?
I hope it, right? I would like to believe it, you know. I hope it.
But it will take a governor's action to make that happen. Donovan's attorneys plan to file their request for commutation in September. And while more than 50 requests were denied even a hearing last year, Donovan is hoping that maybe his case will be different. In Boston, Brad Puffer, NECN.
NECN also contacted former Attorney General Tom Riley. He was the district attorney the time that Joe Donovan was convicted. He declined comment and referred us to the Middlesex District Attorney's Office, and they also chose not to comment.